talk to you this morning for a brief period of time on a subject. I've been wrestling with a title for this here, and this morning I typed in the computer screen at the back there, on your toes, girls, Jesus stopped. Jesus stopped. I want to encourage you this morning, in these moments that we have, to get hold of Jesus and don't let go. To grab hold of Jesus and don't let him go. Hold on with everything that you've got. Hold on with every ounce of strength that you have. Grab hold of Jesus and don't let him go. What are you holding on to today? What is it that we hold on to in life, or what have we been holding on to? What do you depend on to get through life? We heard earlier on as my dad prayed about people who were addicted to drugs but are no longer, who were addicted to alcohol but are no longer. There was some kind of a dependency there for whatever reason that led a number of people in this room and people who are a part of this church down a road where they became dependent on something to get them through. And very often within this nation, it's drugs and alcohol. What are you depending on to get through life? What is it that you're clinging to for security, for assurance, for stability, for meaning, for identity, for acceptance, for belonging? What is it that you are clinging to and have been clinging to throughout your life? We put a lot of faith in relationships, in partners, in career, in lifestyle, in order to fit in or find some kind of belonging or connection in this world. What have you been clinging to? And today I want to encourage you to cling to Jesus, to grab hold of Jesus, and don't ever let go. So we hold on to these things in order to find belonging, in order to find something that we can connect to, in order to find something that will in some way get us through. This becomes the thing that we find our identity in, that we find our security in, that we find something of identity within that which we cling to. So there's an aspect of that which we want to grab hold of and that which we take within our lives. But the other aspect of what we cling to and what we grab hold of is that sometimes we grab on and we hold on for dear life. We hold on to something just for dear life. Growing up as a kid, one of the movies that many of us will have loved to have watched, especially as boys, was Superman. And there's this moment where Lois Lane, she's hanging off from a helicopter, hanging off the edge of the skyscraper. And she's hanging on for dear life. She's hanging on for dear life. And eventually she can't hold on any longer and she falls. And that's the moment whenever Superman swoops in, flies up and grabs hold of her and saves her. And there are moments in movies whenever we see people hanging on for dear life. They're grabbing hold of something. They're hanging from a great height. And they're holding on for dear life in the hope that something or someone will come and save them, because they know that the minute that they let go, they're going to fall and life is going to end. What is it that you're holding on to today? What is it that you're clinging to? What is it that you're grabbing hold of? I want to encourage you, grab hold of Jesus and don't let go. We look for lifelines on this earth. We look for lifelines throughout our journey in life. My lifeline is Jesus. Whenever the Titanic was sinking, there were many that clung to the lifeboats in order to survive. There were many that tied chairs together, wooden chairs together. They tied them with ropes. They threw them into the sea, into the Atlantic Ocean, and they jumped onto the raft that they had built out of chairs in order to save themselves from the freezing waters of the Atlantic Ocean. That was becoming their lifeline. They know that if I let go of this, I'm going to end up drowning. I'm going to end up in the freezing cold water. and I'm not going to survive. And I get the feeling that maybe some people in this place, you're just holding on by your fingertips. You're holding on in life by your fingertips. But what is it that you're clinging to? What is it that you're holding on to? And I want to encourage you in these next few moments, grab hold of Jesus and don't let go. Once you get hold of him, don't ever let go of him. Luke chapter 24, we read these words. As they approached the village, talking about the village of Emmaus, to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going further. The background to this story that we're about to read is that this is actually the day that Jesus has risen from the dead. We have done Easter Sunday last week, and we've done kind of that whole week, and now we're a week ahead. But on the day that Jesus was resurrected from the dead, there are two of his disciples that are walking on a road towards a village called Emmaus. And as they're walking towards Emmaus, Jesus comes along beside them. They don't recognize him as Jesus, even though they knew him, even though they were disciples of his. We would know that one is called Cleopas. He wasn't one of the 12, but Jesus had a lot more disciples than just the 12. And so you've got these two, the other one is unnamed, but they're on the road to Emmaus, and Jesus walks alongside them. And they begin to ask Jesus, about the news of what's been going on. And Jesus is like, what he's talking about, what's going on. And they're like, have you not heard? And they begin to walk along, and Jesus begins to talk with them. And he begins to unpack Old Testament scriptures and Old Testament prophecies about him. And all along the way, they never recognize him as Jesus. But he begins to unpack to them the Old Testament, the scriptures and the prophecies from the Old Testament. And they get to their destination. They get to Emmaus. And as they come to Emmaus, Jesus goes to walk on further. As they stop at Emmaus, at this village, they say to Jesus, in fact, what it goes on to say is that Jesus continued as if he were going further. But they urged him strongly, stay with us. Stay with us. They urged him there as they were walking along. They come to this point where Jesus is going to go this way and they're going to go this way. And they urge Jesus, they plead with him, will you stay with us? Don't go that way. Don't go any further. Stay with us. Maybe that's got to be our prayer today. Jesus, stay with me. And we know that he will. And in those moments as Jesus went, he decided, okay, I'll go to where you're staying. And that night they had a meal, and Jesus broke bread. And in that moment of Jesus breaking bread with them, their eyes are opened. And they recognize, even in all of that time, they don't recognize Jesus. And he breaks bread with them. And in that moment, they see Jesus. They recognize Jesus. But there was this moment where they had to say, Jesus, will you stay with me? There's another passage in Mark chapter 6. This is after the feeding of the 5,000. And what happens is Jesus puts the disciples into a boat, and he sends them on in a boat across the Sea of Galilee. And Jesus waits on top of the mountain to pray. And we're told that Jesus sees them straining at the oars. In Mark chapter 6 and verse 48, it says, he saw the disciples, this is Jesus, looking down from the mountain, straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them walking on the lake, walking on the water. And the reason that I want to share with you from Mark's writing is because what Mark says is that he was about to pass them by. He was about to pass by them. The other writers don't slot this in, but for some reason, Mark writes these words. As Jesus comes walking on the water, they're straining and they're struggling in the water. They're straining and struggling in the boat. And we're told that Jesus was actually about to pass them by. He was about to walk on by. And I want to encourage you today, don't let Jesus walk on by you. Don't let, you see, I have this vision whenever I come into this church, whenever I worship in this church. I always get this image, even on Tuesday night in prayer meetings and whatever it is, whenever we're here and we're worshiping, I get this image and this picture of Jesus walking among us. I get this vision of Jesus walking up and down the rows, walking up and down the aisles, and walking in this building, walking in this room as we're standing, as we're worshiping. I see Jesus with a smile on his face, and he's walking about this room. And we need to get his attention. As he walks by you, don't let him walk on by. Get his attention, grab hold of him. The disciples are straining in the boat. Maybe we're here, and even though we're worshiping, we're straining in life. We're struggling, we're holding on for dear life. And maybe just coming to church isn't enough. Maybe just coming and singing the songs isn't enough. Maybe we need to, in some way, grab hold of the attention of Jesus. We need to get hold of his attention. In Mark chapter 10, there's a story of a man by the name of Bartimaeus. Most of you, I'm sure, will know this story. He's a blind man. He's begging in Jericho, and the story goes like this, that they came to Jericho. This is Jesus and his disciples with a large crowd, and they were about to leave the city. And a blind man named Bartimaeus was sitting by the roadside begging. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." This is what he's calling out. He's been, we don't know, he's been blind probably all his life, and he's begging on the streets by the roadside. And a large crowd begins to pass by, and he hears that it's Jesus. And so he begins to call out, "Son of David, have mercy on me." This is the cry of his heart. What happens is, as he's shouting, that people begin to tell Bartimaeus to be quiet. We're told that many rebuked him, told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more. There were people who were trying to quieten him down. Be quiet. Jesus doesn't want to hear from you. But we're told that he shouted all the more, "Son of David, Son of David, have mercy on me." He's in desperate need. Clinging on to something, is begging, because that's probably the only thing that is getting him through life, because that's the only thing that is bringing any kind of food to him. As he begs on the street. And as he's begging on the street, he knows, he's probably heard the stories of how that Jesus has healed people. And as he's begging on the streets, a crowd passes by. And this blind man begins to call out to Jesus, "Have mercy on me." People begin to rebuke him. Be quiet. Who's trying to silence you? What is trying to silence your voice? What is it that's trying to hold you back from Jesus? This blind man begging on the street wouldn't allow those rebukes to silence him and to hold him back from getting to Jesus. And he calls out all the more. Jesus, with that crowd, was about to pass him by. Bartimaeus wasn't going to allow that to happen. Bartimaeus was about to get the attention of Jesus. "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And what we're told is that Jesus stopped. Jesus stopped. I love this picture. Jesus walking with the crowd. There's a blind man begging on the roadside. And I don't know, sometimes we think that if I come to church, then that's enough. And for this blind man begging on the streets, he knew it wasn't enough for Jesus to pass by. He had to get the attention of Jesus. And he begins to cry out and begins to call out. He begins to shout and to scream, "Have mercy on me." And at that moment, as Jesus is walking with that crowd, Jesus stopped. Jesus will stop for you. But you got to get his attention. You got to get his attention. Psalm 42 tells us that deep cries out the deep. From the depths and the pit of your soul. From that desperate situation, when you call out to Jesus, he stops. He will stop for you. Jesus stopped. He stopped. He said, call him. So they brought the blind man. He said, cheer up on your feet. He's calling you. Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. And there's this remarkable question that Jesus asks of this blind man. Because he's been blind all his days, and yet the question that comes from Jesus is, what do you want me to do for you? What do you want me to do for you? Hello? Can't see. And I guess sometimes whenever I'm praying, I'm like, God, you know. And yes, he does know. But he also wants to hear it. What is it that you want him, that you need him to do for you? What is the blindness that is in your life? And it might be obvious, but Jesus is still asking the question, what do you want me to do for you? We got to get to Jesus. We got to get his attention. Like the woman with the issue of blood, she wouldn't allow the crowds to hold her back. She would get to Jesus and she would touch Jesus. There was loads of reasons why she shouldn't have been there, why she shouldn't have been in that circumstance, in that situation, in that city, in that street. Loads of reasons why she shouldn't even have got to Jesus, but she wasn't going to allow anything to get her back from grabbing hold of Jesus. And the moment that she reached out and she touched him, Jesus stopped. He turned. Who touched me? Who touched me? That's our objective as Christians. Just to touch the hem of his garment, just to touch him, to get his attention, to be with him. We sang this morning, I love your presence. I love your presence. To get to the feet of Jesus, to be in the presence of God. Let me finish with this. Worship team, you can come. You see, clinging to Jesus, getting his attention, grabbing hold of him and holding on for dear life, it's not actually just about survival. Maybe one of the reasons why some of you became Christians, why you became followers of Jesus, was because there was circumstances in your life that brought you to the end of your tether, brought you to the end of your rope, brought you to just the end of yourself. I can't go on like this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I've got to do something. I've got to make a change. And the right change you made in coming to Jesus. But we don't just come to Jesus for survival. Yeah, that's a great help. To hold on to him, to grab hold of him. Don't let go, to hold on to him for dear life. We do that because in him we find life. He is the creator, the author of life. We hold on to him and we get life from him. But it's not just about survival. Grabbing hold of Jesus and holding on to Jesus, getting his attention, is about what we gain in life. Paul, in writing to the Philippians, he writes these words. He says, but whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I now consider them garbage, rubbish, that I may gain Christ. What Paul is actually saying to the Philippians, to the church in Philippi, to a place where he was persecuted. You can read about it in the book of Acts. Paul and Silas end up in prison. They're beaten. And it's in Philippi where, in that prison, at midnight, that they begin to worship God. And God opens the doors, fling open of the prison. And the prison guard is about to kill himself because they think that Paul and Silas have escaped. They say, no, don't worry, we're still here. We've got fireland on tonight. We're not going anywhere. We're staying here. Don't worry. Don't need to kill yourself. That was where the church started. And Paul writes to these Christians in Philippi, to this church. And he begins to share with them his story of being a Jewish Pharisee. He says, I knew everything. You couldn't get more Jewish than me. The school that I was taught in, the man who taught me, I knew it all. And Paul was on a road to an amazing career. As a Pharisee, as a teacher, Paul was on a road to an amazing career. This was everything that any Jewish boy would have wanted. Paul was living the dreams of every Jewish boy in Israel. What he had known, what he had gained, or thought that he had gained. This was everything to him. It was everything to him. And what he's saying is, you know what? I don't want that anymore. Whatever I thought and considered were gains in my upbringing, in my schooling, in my education, in my career, in my teaching, in my knowledge, everything that I had gained, you know what? They're actually not gains. They are not gains to me. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. Paul got rid of all of that stuff for the sake of grabbing hold of Jesus. Paul grabbed hold of Jesus and he never let go. The letter that he's writing to the Philippians, he's writing from prison. If ever there was a man that had justification for leaving the ministry, for walking away from God, from letting go, from not holding on anymore, I would say it was Paul. With everything that he had been through, with the punishments, the beatings, the whippings, the stonings, the imprisonments, the shipwrecks, everything that Paul had been through because he was preaching about Jesus. And yet Paul never let go. He never let go. I'm holding on to Jesus. I'm holding on to Jesus. I could have held on to all of those other things, but I let them go because holding on to Jesus is the only thing worth doing. Holding on to Jesus is the only person worth grabbing hold of. I want to encourage you. Get his attention. Don't let him pass you by. Get him to stop. Grab hold of him. Don't ever let go. Don't ever let go. Don't ever let go of Jesus.